this isn't a movement. This is our lives, and we have to live it every single day.
It's going to be tough. It's a tough fight, but we just got to stick with it.
Walking in my neighborhood, can't count the amount of times police have just conveniently driven past me.
When you get stopped by a police officer, stick your hand out the window. I'm like, stick your hand out the window? What's going on? He said, these cops will shoot you.
And I said, why'd you pull me over? And it was a white guy, and he says, because I ran your license plate and nothing came back.
I don't think racism is in your DNA. Like, you weren't born to be racist.
My objective through life has always been I have to prove the narrative wrong.
And I'm really kind of sad and kind of embarrassed and feel awful that there is so much racism.
Welcome, I'm Art Holliday, alongside 5 on Your Side's Rene Knott and Ahmad Hicks. This is Race. Listen, learn, live. If you're one of the people who melts down at the mention of Black Lives Matter or systemic racism, or athletes using their platforms for overdue change, this may not be the program for you. But if you're someone who's genuinely willing to listen, someone who's interested in being part of the solution, by all means stay tuned. We're glad you're with us.
So how do you start a conversation about race in America without people getting angry or defensive? Why does race seem to be such a dangerous topic these days? Is it because you might say the wrong thing or express an opinion that other people don't necessarily share? Seriously, race seems to be a taboo discussion. But don't things need to change? How are we as a nation going to understand our differences if we don't talk without the fear of not being heard?
And for the next 60 minutes, you'll hear from a number of accomplished individuals, some who may be familiar to you, well-known people who have had assumptions made about them based on their skin color, and other people who have succeeded in spite of the racial roadblocks placed in front of them. Our panel members have gathered to share their truths to illuminate societal problems, and our goal? Context and solutions to problems America has been facing for decades.
Let's begin by meeting our panel. First up, Jeremy Maclin. Jeremy grew up in Meacham Park and attended Kirkwood High School. He was a wide receiver at Mizzou, where he was a 2-time consensus All-American. The Philadelphia Eagles drafted Jeremy in the first round in 2009. He also played for the Chiefs and Ravens before retiring in 2019. His nonprofit, J Mac Gives Back, helps youth in the St. Louis area. Sean Weatherspoon grew up in Jasper, Texas. He was a linebacker at the University of Missouri and was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons in 2010 as the 19th overall pick. He also played for the Arizona Cardinals. Brad Smith grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. Smith was a 4-year starter at quarterback for the Mizzou Tigers. Brad was the MVP in the 2006 Hula Bowl and excelled in the classroom, earning a spot on the Big 12 All-Academic team. He was drafted by the New York Jets in 2006. Ryan Howard has an impressive baseball resume. World Series champion, National League Rookie of the Year, 3-time All-Star, National League MVP. Ryan grew up in Florissant and went to Lafayette High School. A first baseman, Ryan played college ball at Missouri State. He was drafted by the Phillies in 2001 and called up to the majors 3 years later, spending his entire career with Philadelphia. Ryan holds numerous Phillies records, retiring in 2016. Will Franklin grew up in Beaumont, Texas, and finished high school at Vashon. He was a wide receiver at Mizzou. He's played for the KC Chiefs, Detroit Lions, and Oakland Raiders. Will served as the coordinator of player development at Mizzou, returning to Vashon in 2018 as head football coach and assistant athletic director. Mike Jones grew up in Kansas City. Another Mizzou grad, he originally played running back but switched to linebacker. He signed with the Oakland Raiders as a rookie free agent and then started with the St. Louis Rams in 1997. He's known for ensuring the Rams' victory in Super Bowl 34 by tackling the Titans' Kevin Dyson at the 1-yard line. He is head football coach at SLUH High. Justin Britt attended high school in Lebanon, Missouri, where he lettered in football, wrestling, and track. He started for Mizzou at both left and right tackles. Justin was drafted by the Seahawks in 2013 and is currently a free agent in the NFL. Rounding out our panel, former Mizzou head coach Gary Pinkel. His program at Mizzou produced 9 first-round NFL draft picks, 7 bowl victories, and 5 conference divisional championships. Pinkel is the founder of the GP Made Foundation, helping children who face health, physical, and economic challenges.
Everyone's take on racism is just a little different. So we begin our conversation getting to know our panel of athletes just a little better, asking the question, have they ever been treated differently because of the color of their skin?
I grew up in a town, small town in Texas called Jasper, Texas. And there's a lot of history of, racism. It's a place where, it's a small town and everybody really, just kind of gathers around sports. People love sports. And, when I was playing ball with my buddies, it was something, where we just focused on ball. But after ball, I noticed that none of my white buddies came to my house to eat dinner. I noticed that at the football field, it was always a little different than it was at the baseball field. And it kind of discouraged my buddies to go out to play baseball. So I didn't have a lot of black buddies that I played baseball with. So we kind of hung tight together. When I got a chance to get to Missouri, it was like a safe haven. I didn't understand what was, the systematic oppression in Missouri. I thought it was just going on, in my area. And when I got to school, Coach Pinkel and the rest of the athletic staff in the athletic department they had nurtured an environment where we felt, safe, and nothing kind of felt different to me. I just saw my teammates as my teammates, and, we were all trying to achieve a common goal. But when you step outside of that bubble in Columbia, Missouri, that's where, it was these things were put in my face a little bit more that reminded me of Jasper, Texas.
I grew up born and raised in St. Louis. I was born in North County, Florissant. We moved out to Wildwood, where my parents still reside now, but went to Lafayette High School. And obviously from a baseball standpoint, you understand that your white counterparts, that's where the more competitive baseball is going to be. I grew up, I played baseball on black teams. I played on a white team, but it was a completely different animal playing on that white team, because you look around and you're, like I said, you're one of one or maybe one of 2 black kids on that team. And, you do kind of feel some type of way in terms of like, okay, well, my teammates are my teammates and I'm going to enjoy myself and have a good time. But in terms of other things, they can't really relate to you. So you find yourself in situations where you're kind of looking to relate more to them as opposed to somebody of your own color.
For me, so for those who don't know my story, when I was about 13, 14 years old, I had a white family take me in. And I met this family when I was 9 years old. So I was able to spend some time with them and understand something I had never seen before. You know what I mean? Something as little as eating dinner together as a family, right? We didn't do that at my house. We didn't sit around the table and eat dinner. So I was able to kind of see different things. And I'll never forget this, man. We're going trick-or-treating in the neighborhood. And we get up to this house and the family asks, okay, who lives in this neighborhood? And, Tyler and Mitchell, who are my white brothers, they raised their hands, and I didn't live in the neighborhood at the time, so I didn't raise my hand, and, they gave them these big king size Snicker bars, and I had, a Tootsie Roll. And like, at the time, it didn't hit me what that was, you know what I mean? And that's what, that's the type of stuff that that I faced kind of growing up, I had a teammate call me the N-word before. So it's always been, relevant in my life because I've experienced it. So I've dealt with it all, but the one thing that I've never, let that affect is how I view people, because I felt like if I let those instances or those couple of examples shape my mindset for how I view everybody who looks like that or everybody who does what they do, I would never reach my maximum potential as a person. I would never have gotten to where I am now.
I can remember as a kid, in Kansas City that, there were certain areas that they just told you, you don't go there because it's going to be a problem for a black man. And I can remember it was strictly north of the river, going towards the airport. There was areas that you didn't go to, and I'm quite sure everyone on there has experienced something like that as a black man, where your family has told you hey guys, it may not be smart for you to go over there because it's going to be a problem. And I just can remember as a kid, I played multiple sports, and as athletes, you're able to go. I shouldn't say able. You tend to go places that most of your guys you hang out with don't go. You'll play in areas that a lot of your friends like, hey man, why are you going over there? And like, I play baseball over there. I play football, basketball. So you're used to certain environments that a lot of your friends that aren't doing that aren't used to that. So as you get older, when you're playing in high school and then when you go to college, you're playing baseball, football, wherever, all over the country, you go over different areas that a lot of people don't experience. So a lot of things has to do with you being in an area and people not used to going outside their comfort zone in those areas.
Growing up in inner city St. Louis, you don't really interact with a lot of whites. It's predominantly black, 95% black. So the first conversation when I committed my junior year, the first conversation a teacher of mine at Vashon said to me was, Columbia is a racist town. And I had never heard it. I had visited Columbia a few times, played some basketball games and showed me games, all these different things. So I didn't really understand. And a year later, I get on campus and we summer welcome, you're going through all these different things, and we get to the sorority houses. And guys on the team that had been there a couple of weeks before me that were freshmen like me were like, man, stay away from over here. Campus police, they really protective over the sorority house. So, you take what those before you have said and you stay as clear as possible. So that never was something that I encountered while on campus at Mizzou. I just listened to those before me. Hey, you stay here, you stay away from there, you can go here. Even when you out, you just respect what those who have had experience in these things tell you.
First, I'm just really humbled to hear everybody's stories. I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and that's if you look up hood in a dictionary, Youngstown's picture is next to it. So for me, what framed at the time my experience as a kid was fear of being hurt by people like me. Just the violence and the depravity that I saw on a daily basis was what scared me. So everything my mom and the church and sports did was to take me away from that. I didn't have the look that a lot of my friends had, that they would be treated a different way. I was the safe one. So I get to college and it really started hitting me, being a quarterback and a guy people see a lot. And it kind of started to hurt me after the fact that, Brad's the safe one. Like he's not like the rest of them. And that's what, probably my sophomore year, I started to feel that weight of seeing my other teammates who maybe weren't in the spotlight as much, weren't having the ball in their hands as much, and they didn't look the way that makes white people or the majority culture comfortable. So they were treated in a different way than I was. And that would hurt me. It really dug me deep. So now, being out of the game of football, walking in my neighborhood, I can't count the amount of times police have just conveniently driven past me in this neighborhood where they never are when I'm out for a walk. When I go in for business deals or try to talk to people about opportunities, I'm just another guy, somebody who's not intelligent until they found out what I did for a living or my experience or whatever success I had playing football. So, Black exceptionalism is a real thing. They say, well, all you guys are on this call. You got a lot of money. You had a lot of success. What are you complaining about? But you can't take this small pot of people and clump the experience of the entire community into one pot. So I think the biggest thing I've seen since leaving the game of football is now you're regular, and now you feel the brunt and the weight that you might have been oblivious to before.
So before I ask my main question, Justin Britt has been sitting patiently and listening to members of the Mizzou football community share their stories, as well as Ryan Howard as well. But Justin, having heard what you've heard so far, I'm wondering what you're thinking. I mean, you're representing with your Black Lives Matter T-shirt on, but after listening to what you've heard for the last 25 minutes or so, what are you thinking?
It's heavy. It's real heavy because I don't know everyone's stories. I knew J-Mac grew up with, in a white family house, but I didn't know that he went through the experiences he has gone through. So it's heavy. And, a little bit about me. I say I'm from Lebanon, Missouri. I spent sixth grade on there. And that's a predominant white town. And I think we had two families that were Black in the neighborhood. And they both played football. But there was a reason why there wasn't many. And I came to find that out, and it came to light after I supported Mike Bennett. I went back home and did a camp, which I had done 2 years prior. And then the third year, my first year, we had 450 kids from my hometown. And then my third year, after I supported Mike Bennett, we had maybe 50. We had 150 total, 50 from my hometown. And it was free. And so I was like, this is the last year I'm doing it. I'm not appreciated.
I just want to keep the conversation going. I was watching TV the other day, and one thing I heard LeBron say was, people call this the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, every movement that I've seen has always ended. This isn't a movement. This is our lives. So I think it's our job to keep the conversation going and just continue to educate people and get people to learn.
Okay, so I got a show and tell here. If you grew up in St. Louis, you know that Bob Gibson is an icon here, right? My childhood hero. That's why I have this autographed drawing of him. So whenever I see anything involving Bob Gibson, I pay attention. So the Hall of Famer was recently quoted about the Black Lives Matter movement. And this is what Gibson said. For all my career, nothing was done. And I had to endure a whole hell of a lot that most Cardinal fans probably don't have any idea about. I'm really proud of the fact they had these demonstrations, and it's not just Black people. Now, my question is, it's likely that Gibson, like many of you, are admired by white fans who don't agree with Black Lives Matter. Sure. Would you talk about that contradiction and how it relates to you?
I'm just going to start off by saying this. What you just said, Black Lives Matter, the fact that is a problem to some people is absurd. Like, Black Lives Matter. Like, I'm Black and my life matters, right? And somebody legit has a problem with that. Like, just think about that for a second. Like, that's absurd. And like like Spoon said earlier, like, we can't escape the reality of us being Black in America, nor would I want to. I love who I am. Wouldn't change it for the world. But sometimes you get on social media and you're like, man, this is overwhelming. And like, I just think that it's so absurd that somebody would have a problem with somebody saying Black Lives Matter. Like that, like it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't at all.
It's heavy. It's heavy, Mac. Sports is the main thing in sports. People just, they see you and you play for their team, and they want you to do great for their team. You go to another team, they'll write you off, just going to another team. So I mean, it doesn't surprise me that they write you off if you retweet Black Lives Matter. And I think, we just really have to take the time to write back to people who write you and say something that you might not agree with, and try to, just give them a little bit of you, and maybe they can, see the human in you, because obviously, you play for their team or whatnot. Maybe they might be more inclined to listen. you know, it's going to be tough. It's a tough fight, but we just got to stick with it and stay with it.
If I could get in on this conversation with all you great superstars for just a moment, we've done a lot of talking to prominent African-American sports figures, people like Ozzie Smith, Brian Jordan, Lovie Smith, the fine coach of Illinois, and they all had kind of a common denominator to their story. They were pulled over in their vehicles because of the color of their skin. And I'm wondering, Jeremy, you kind of alluded to that. Sometimes you get pulled over and then they find out who you are and they let you go. But what about the lingering bitterness? You know, what would have happened if you weren't a star wide receiver?
It's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's unfortunate that stuff like that happens. It's unfortunate that, you know, if I wasn't who I was at that particular time, you know, that particular stop would have been completely different. You know, when the cop pulled me over, and it happened in Columbia, Missouri, and it was because I didn't use my turn signal to switch lanes. And when he pulled me over, this is after my redshirt freshman year. So this is after I blew up All-American here, you know, all the records, whatever, right? Mizzou Cotton Bowl win. The first thing he says was, "I don't give a damn who you are." And this is without me telling him who I am. So this is the first thing he says to me. And then we're sitting there and we're talking, and out of nowhere he just says, "You know what? I can get rid of you and nobody would even care." And I'm like, what? I'm 19, you know? I'm like, because I didn't use my turn signal to pull over into another lane. Yeah, I broke a rule. I broke a law. Yeah, give me a ticket, send me on my day. But you telling me that you can get rid of me and nobody would care? Well, I know for a fact a lot of people care. I got family, right? So I know my family's gonna care.
And then my final thing is when I got to Los Angeles my rookie year, you know, I'm thinking I'm in the NFL, and I can remember distinctly in our first team meeting after we get done, all the black players were saying, "When you get stopped by a police officer, stick your hand out the window." I'm like, "Stick your hand out the window? What's going on?" He said, "These cops will shoot you." And this is coming from guys that are playing in the NFL that have been in LA for a while, and it blew me away. And so, I mean, those experiences like that, you know, unfortunately, that was the way of the world. That is the way of the world at times. And, you know, everyone's, you know, is not always comfortable to talk about it, but those are situations that we find ourselves in.
I want to bring Coach Pinkel into this conversation now. And Coach, you're listening to all these different stories. And I think one of the things that a couple of guys were alluding to is having the talk, where we're told to conduct ourselves in certain manners. You're bringing in players to Mizzou that came from all over the country, all kinds of different backgrounds. Do you, or did you take that time to have the talk with them to let them know what it's like to be here, to let them know that there's a certain conduct and a certain way of carrying yourself that will keep you from getting into trouble?
Yeah, I think we talked about all those things. I mean, I try to have an environment with all my players. By the way, I'm so proud of you guys. Start crying here. And Justin too. You know, you're putting your hand on your teammate's shoulder. I just think it's awesome, and I'm really kind of sad and kind of embarrassed and feel awful that there is so much racism. And, you know, you guys expressing from your heart things that happen to you, and it just breaks my heart. And so, you know, when I grew up, I graduated from high school in 1970. Nobody make fun of my age, okay? I graduated high school in 1970. In the 60s was crazy, absolutely crazy. And when I grew up, I was 13 years old or 14 years old. I don't have to have told this to our players if I remember it. But I went out and played with some of my buddies up there. It was an all-white neighborhood. And I had middle income, had a mom and dad at home, great, but didn't have, you know, I didn't get a car until I was in college, stuff like that. So I grew up with a really great mom and dad. Anyway, some of my buddies were using the N-word. And so I threw it out there. I go home, an hour later, I go in, my mom's standing at the door, and one of the neighbors knew that how she felt my mom was and her kids, how respectful they got to be people. So she calls her up and says, you know, Gary's down here doing this. And he used the N-word a couple times. And she looked at me, and she asked me if I'd done it. And I looked at her, and I was going to lie, but I knew I wouldn't get away with it. And she ended up taking me into the bathroom and lathered up a washcloth and stuck it in my mouth and went around like 3 times, pulled it out. I didn't get sick or anything. There's no abuse. But in my home, how I was taught the day I was born, okay, you're respectful to all people. You're respectful to give the benefit of doubt for all people all the time. Whether you're gay, whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Christian, whether you're Jewish, whatever, you respect people. And so I lived like that my whole life. And that's, I always wanted, when I had a football program, I wanted players to come in and not have those kind of experiences that you all guys are telling me. That in our walls, you were treated respectfully regardless of your color, and that wasn't even an issue of it. And so we tried to, you know, create that kind of environment. And it's just sad. I mean, you know, people need to see this tape. They need to see this. You know, you guys are very well respected, and they gotta understand, because I think a lot of them don't get it, and I would like to think that they don't care, but I think a lot don't get it.
Being back on campus when things took off in 2015, I really couldn't actually understand what the current players at that time was experiencing, because I had never experienced. My experience in Columbia was total opposite for some of those guys. You know what I mean? I didn't get that. You know what I mean? I grew up in St. Louis. Our cops were black. Our firemen were black. Our teachers, 90% black. Our administrators, my parents, my family. I didn't experience a lot of interracial things. So I knew of these things, but it didn't hit my front door until you start seeing more things show up over social media. And me having kids now, and I have kids that live in Columbia, where I have to, you know what I mean, continue to talk to them, because, hey man, it's a lot of things going on in this world, and you're in a town where it's literally still some racism going on.
If he's telling me he pulled me over and I didn't do anything, it's like, that's wrong.
He's a fan favorite in Philly and grew up here in St. Louis. Major League Baseball's Ryan Howard. When Race, Listen, Learn, Live returns.
There's levels of racism that I think a lot of people do not understand. And one of those things is the little subtle things that are said to you, the looks that you receive from time to time. From the guys on this call, give us all a better understanding of what it's like to be the black person in the room, the guy who's in the expensive store, the guy that's trying to buy the nice car, the guy that's just trying to live his life, but at the same time feels the looks, hears the little messages like, oh, he speaks so well and stuff like that. Oh, what a nice dresser. Oh, you come from over there? I mean, I still get that to this day. I'm a 56-year-old man who's on television 5 days a week, yet people will still look at you differently. And I try to think, oh, it's because I'm on TV. And a lot of the time it isn't. So just speak to that idea that there's more racism out there than just the blatant, hey, you N-word. There's a lot of little things that take place as well, right?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you get so many kind of little backhanded compliments. Oh, he's so articulate. He speaks so well. And it's just, how am I supposed to speak? You know, am I supposed to sound a certain way? Because I think like either Brad or like Jeremy said, when you talk a certain way, all of a sudden you're not black. You know, you're not black enough because you don't talk like, you know, somebody who grew up in a different area. So it's one of those things to where it doesn't make sense. Like, look, we've gone to school, we've gotten educations, we know how to speak. We know how to go about walking around and going to the store. The thing I love to do is I'll go walk in a Gucci store or a Louis store and look as bummy as I possibly can. I will go in some sweat shorts, flip-flops. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And you walk in and you just get these looks. because you know in the back of your mind, I can go in here and buy out this whole store if I wanted to. But when you walk in, it's about the looks that you get, because it's automatically assumed that, oh, well, because he's got on these sweatpants and he's got these flip-flops, like,
you don't supposed to be here.
I can remember walking into class, at Missouri, my first class, and when you walk in the classroom, everyone looks like, okay, what are you doing here? I mean, it's sad, but it was a fact. You walk in the classroom and you may be one of two or one, especially a smaller classroom, where you may be the only black guy in the classroom. And so, of course, everyone looks at you. And then like Ryan said, oh, he must be an athlete. No, it couldn't be that he's going to school here because, first of all, you deserve to go there anyway. But to go a step further, they expect you to not be there. I'm just going to be candid about it. Not expecting to see a guy, because I started off in engineering. So I'm going to calculus and chemistry, and I'm walking in the classroom, and you can tell when someone looks at you and is like, are you supposed to really be here? Are you in the wrong classroom? And, you got to get beyond that, because, you're doing what you want to do and what you're supposed to do. But, I mean, it sits in I hate to say it, from day one when you walk in the classroom. And then, again, when you get opportunity to do well for yourself and you walk in somewhere where people aren't used to seeing you, everyone's looking at you. And unfortunately, all of us have been part of when people walking around, when you're looking at something and you have someone that I call them an admirer of you, even though they're not admiring what you're doing, they're making sure that you're not doing something, and they're walking around the store with you, seeing if you're going to steal something. And that, I mean, it's sad, but that's just a fact.
Frank, after you hear all these stories, being a white broadcaster in St. Louis, why did you feel that it was important to share Black stories, especially after George Floyd was killed? And how did you look at life differently as a white man who's been covering Black athletes for 30 plus years?
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't feel any racism growing up at all. I grew up in a white section of town. I didn't have to deal with it at all. But when we were talking to some of these, historical sports figures and very prominent African Americans in the St. Louis area, it was jaw-dropping. I mean, a guy like Ozzie Smith pulled over and said to the police officer, "What did I do wrong?" And the response was, "Nothing yet." And it wasn't just Ozzie. It was Brian Jordan. It was the CEO of Worldwide Technology, Dave Stewart. I tell you, what it did for me was it made me realize, of the struggles that these athletes and these sports figures have had to grow up in. And I had no idea. I thought that as a superstar athlete or a big-time sports figure that everything was easy for you. But now I know the struggles, and it really has made me look at things differently. There's no doubt about that.
If I could, I'd like to go back to something that Mike Jones said just a moment ago. Most of you, probably all of you, displayed great athletic ability at an early age. And I'm wondering, were there assumptions made by teachers about you academically? And were they low expectations because of the way you look?
That I've heard stories about guys being told that from teachers, but I never had to experience that. I'm like Will, man. I've always wanted to beat the narrative, right? I was on a roll in high school. I made the dean's list when I was in college. Like that was always because even though I never had it said to me directly, I always knew kind of, okay, they might think this about me, so let me try to prove them wrong. And that's always been my mentality, even in sports. I have a prove them wrong mentality. And I think I think you can ask everybody on this screen right now that has that proving somebody wrong fueled them to do things and achieve certain things.
Man, that's a deep question. I mean, this is gonna sting a little bit. I mean, because being a kid, I had some emotional traumatization, coming from, my parents had split up and we moved across the country and we're living in Youngstown, Ohio. So that was traumatic for me. And then to be in an environment which was so violent that the fear, the constant stress, it caused me to, not be able to cope with a lot of things that were going on, which a lot of young people nowadays are, in our experiences growing up, like a lot of us, they're going through that right now. And it was so hard in school to try to focus on, adding and subtracting and reading and writing. Like I couldn't even focus. So I had to go in these special ed classes, like in kindergarten, first and second grade. I was a smart kid. I asked a lot of questions. I thought I understood, and I just couldn't cope. So I'm labeled as the special ed kid, like not smart enough. Until somebody came and a teacher that saw the good in me and then was able to bring it out of me, African-American teacher. Everybody else wanted to label me as the, that special ed kid. And if I would have continued, I'd have been in that system, and, that system leads to prison. So I never had a teacher necessarily tell me, we don't think you're smart enough, but just by the actions. So I think a lot of times it could, it could be covert that, hey man, let's keep him at this level. And sometimes it's really overt depending on who it is. So it's, I have experienced it, but I'm thankful that I didn't hear a teacher tell me, like Jeremy was saying, that, you're not going to ever amount to anything. I'm grateful for that.
It doesn't resonate with them because it doesn't affect them. They haven't gotten randomly pulled over. I've had my situations in Philly. We're at the stoplight. Cop pulls up next to me. I'm going left. He's going right. Light turns green. Boom. I turn left. Cop sits at the light for a second. Then he turns left and comes and follows me. We go through this little barricade or whatever. Pulls me over. I asked him. I said, "Well, officer, what did I do? Was I speeding? Did I not signal or anything?" I said, "Why'd you pull me over?" And it was a white guy, and he says, "Because I ran your license plate and nothing came back." And I was like, wait, isn't that supposed to be a good thing? Like, what did I do? And to like Jeremy's story, to where Jeremy didn't signal, it's like, okay, pull me over. And luckily, like a black officer had pulled up, and I was talking to him as well, and he talked to the white guy, and he's like, "Dude, like, what are you doing? Like, do you know who this is? Blah blah blah." And I told the black officer, I said, "Look, man, it don't matter who I am and what I do from that standpoint. Like, if I broke the law, I broke the law, and then pull me over and give me a ticket. But if he's telling me he pulled me over and I didn't do anything."
Growing up, what was pushed in your household? Was it you need to make it athletically, or you need to succeed academically?
My parents always stressed education. My mom's a teacher, so she was in the same school district I was in, so it was tough to abuse the Weatherspoon boys, because my mom was there, and she would stand up for us and allow us to stand up for ourselves. I even switched classes 2 or 3 times, growing up in Jasper. And, when I was at Mizzou and I was having trouble with Spanish, my parents were calling me like, "You're not going to graduate if you don't get this right." And I'm already like ranked like as one of the top linebackers that don't even have to go to school anymore. So that's just how my household was.
My mom, she didn't even care for sports. I only played 2 years of high school football. How much my mom didn't care for sports. It was always education, and my family came up that same way. Sports was never really an avenue for my family. It was always finish high school, get a real job. I preach that. Like, I really don't care about football, but I know it's a vehicle that can take us farther in life, along with educating yourself along the way. So I commend my mom and my family for always preaching education. And I can remember when Coach came in the house, and that's what he said to my mom. He didn't promise her I was going to get an opportunity to play in the NFL. He promised her I was going to graduate college. And I've done that. You know what I mean? And that's all you can ask when you're talking about changing a family. I was a first-generation student. That means a lot in my family, because everyone that came after me wanted to go to college.
I think we don't see the humanity in each other. And a lot of times, we see it from our white brothers and sisters, that it's hard for them to see the humanity in a black athlete, or the humanity in a kid getting pulled over, because, that's just not what they're around on a typical basis. If one of my children I see them daily. I watch them. I watch their interactions. I watch, when they do things right, when they do things wrong, and I see myself in them. So when I discipline them, I'll discipline in a way in love, so they have a chance to come back and do it better the next time. And that's easy. So if I'm a police officer and I pull Will Franklin over, I see myself in him. I have empathy for him. I understand what he's been through, what he's going through. And, I think we lack that when it's, when we're dealing, especially with the divide in our country now, we don't see the humanity in other people. We see the worst. So, I think that's a big part of the solution is love. And then when you love somebody, you see the humanity in them. You see the frailty that you have as an individual, that you don't have it all right, and neither does this person. So let's work it out together.
I know many of you have opinions and possibly even relationships with Colin Kaepernick. It's really fascinating to me that in the 4 years since he took a knee and we got to George Floyd, we understood why he was taking a knee, even though his message is still trying to be hijacked and misconstrued.
Right.
Would you all talk about Colin Kaepernick?
I had a chance to play against Colin in college for a couple of years, compete against him in the NFL, and didn't really know him. I was in Arizona at the time when he was with the 49ers, and everything was starting to happen, and I came back to Atlanta, and then that's when everybody was getting all the questions. Just what about Colin? What about Colin? I didn't know exactly why Colin was doing what he was doing, but I had to educate myself. And I'm from Jasper, Texas. I say I'm from Jasper, Texas. So I get what this guy is actually standing up for. Even if you guys do the background and see like where he's from and how he grew up or whatever, like he's standing up for other people. So it was just a selfless act. It's just sad that it's transpired the way it has. But when he started to take his knee, the world wasn't standing in the same place that it is right now. With this pandemic, everybody is kind of honed in on their phones and their computers and just like, I got to stay in the house. So I feel like a lot of people were able to see, and they kind of put it in front of a lot of people that really didn't take the time to understand what was really happening. And I think that's why we're on this call right now instead of, 4 or 5 years ago.
Ryan, what about you? Baseball. That wasn't really a thing, before this year, seeing guys take a knee and really support Black Lives Matter.
Baseball's a different animal. Football is predominantly black. Basketball is predominantly black. Baseball, it's one of those things to where it's like you have to be, and I've had conversations with guys all the time when we talk about how you have to be 2 to 3 times better than your white counterparts in baseball to be able to just continue to try to have an opportunity to go out and play. And that's just what it is. Like, I know people aren't going to like it, but that's what it is. And I think the thing is, the problem is that this whole situation, and for lack of a better term, Jared, it's like this movement, right? There's people that just don't want to hear it. And they just don't care to hear it. Yep. And that's the problem. Because this stuff has been going on. My parents grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Pops was a part of the civil rights movement and did the whole 9. And here we are today, and we're still doing the same thing. We're still doing the same thing. And unfortunately, it's like this is kind of it's a gift and a curse in the same breath, because this is what it's had to take for us to be able to have these conversations again and really get it out for people to really start to look at and really start to understand. Because it is important when you see, all the black folks that are on this call, but having Coach on here, having Justin on here, to be able, because that's where it starts, man. It starts with people like them, to where it's like, I want to learn. How do I become a better person? How do I help change the situation? And to me, that's what it kind of comes down to, is like, ultimately, you got to want to change it.
He was the lightning rod for a lot of this stuff that's happening now. When you're the lightning rod, you take the brunt force of the angst, that force against you. And I think one of the things that stuck out to me when he first started protesting, I think he mentioned one of the lines in the national anthem that says, "No refuge could save the hiring enslaved from the terror of flight." or the gloom of the grave. So, like in rebuttal to, hey, you're disrespecting the flag and the anthem, but at the same time, this anthem was glorifying the killing of slaves who were fighting for freedom, or so forth and so on. So just the dichotomy of like, how can we're bipolar as a country. In one instance, we put the face on like we're perfect, and behind the scenes, we have a lot of nasty history that I think we don't grapple with as a country as a whole. And that's where the healing starts. Like to Coach Pinkel's point, it's like we can have the conversations. We can take Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben off the shelf. We could, all these stores could do all these cool things to kind of quench the flames. But 20 years from now, we'll have a no-name waffle mix on the shelves instead of a real change. So, grapple with that history. Talk about what really happened. Not indoctrinating into we can glorify these heroes we thought we had, but let's have a real conversation with our children, with ourselves, and we got to start there.
We can't shy away from things that make you uncomfortable. You got to embrace it. Like, I remember whenever I stood by Mike and, it was a preseason game against the Vikings, and I did it and my heart was like I was terrified. I could hear people in the back like, stand up, yelling at Mike. They were ignoring me. They were ignoring the white guy that had his hand on his shoulder. They were just yelling at Mike. And so I knew that the media was going to come ask me questions, but yet I was uninformed and uneducated about the matter. All I heard was that my brother, who I battle with every day and go to war with, asked for a white man to help him. And that's all it took for me to say, I'll be that guy. Let me be that guy.
At the Mexico City Summer Olympics, you had a couple of athletes stand on the stand and raise the black fist. At one point, you had the summit where you had some of the greatest names in the history of athletics, including Jim Brown, Bobby Mitchell, Muhammad Ali, Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who all stood together unified and talked about possibly having a boycott unless things changed, unless times changed. Here we are 50 plus years later, we're having the same conversation once again. How do we move forward so that we don't have this conversation 50 years from now?
I got 3 points on this. I think the first thing and probably the most important thing is education, right? I think it's important for Black people and white people to educate themselves on the history of this country and the history of things that have gone on in this country. I think that will give people a better understanding of why things need to change moving forward. I think number 2 is to continue to have these type of conversations, right? Continue to share stories, continue to have somebody like Justin here listening to what we have to say and us listening to what he has to say as well. I think that's gonna, I think that's how you move to change things in the right direction. And I think lastly I think it comes down to how we raise our children, right? It comes down to the type of things that I instill in my daughter, into my son, into Ryan and his kids, Spoon and his kids, Brad, Will, everybody on here. It's how you raise your children as well. Justin, if you raise your children with love and compassion and looking at people for who they are, not what they look like. Now, that doesn't mean ignore color, right? I want my daughter to know that she's Black, right? She should know that she's Black. You should be proud in who you are. You should be proud in your own skin. But I think if we raise our children to love, have compassion, and just be genuine good people, I think that is how you change the world.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off him. Yeah, like you were saying, I think it's leadership. Like, I want my kids to grow up and understand what's happening right now and understand how they can continue to help this country grow and how they can continue to love each other. Because like I grew up, I just wanted to play football. I didn't care about school. I just wanted to play football. And my parents wanted me to, what's up? my parents wanted me to just treat everyone the way they were treated. Like, I grew up in a military family. I lived in Waynesville, Missouri, which I was a minority in that town. And then I go from that to living in Missouri, where it's the complete opposite. And like, to me, it didn't matter. Like, I just love people equally. It's crazy to me because some of my best friends happen to be Black. Somehow I tend to, lean on them, and I vibe with them more than I do with, some white people, and because they get it and they understand the world. And I feel like a lot of white people are naive, and they, just because of their experience, their upbringing, and their lack of education in that aspect. But I think it's leadership, and when we talk about kids and what we can do, it starts there, because I don't think racism is in your DNA. Like, you weren't born to be racist. You were taught to be racist by your environment, your household, who you hung out with, what you did. Don't do that. You were taught to be racist. And so how do we fix this? I think that's a great way to start.
The sports world has done a great job of just keeping the conversation going. It's a different world that we're living in. And what I try to do, I have 3 youngins, and I try to just love them the way my parents loved me, because that's all they could give me. They really didn't have a lot of answers for me. They gave me, love and a certain way to move. And that's what's gotten me up until this point right now. And I think it's sad that I have to move a certain way, but growing up in Jasper, Texas prepared me to be better equipped moving forward throughout my life. So here I am today, looking at these things that are going on the TV and reading all these things on the newspapers. And it's just disheartening, because I don't have any issues with anybody. I feel like, you're a person, I'm a person, and we're here to help each other. And, and if you're not helping someone, then I feel like you're just wasting your time.
Well, I think all of us have, in one way or another, have said the goal is to move the conversation forward. Definitely we need to look back to see where we've been, but this is about our children. It's about moving the conversation forward. So to the people who will see this, I often say there are 3 groups. There's the people that already get it, where you're preaching to the choir. And then there's the people who wish all of us would shut up. And then there's a group of people in the middle that understand what they don't know, but they are willing to listen and they are willing to learn. So what's our message to them to close this out?
Right is right, wrong is wrong, and there's no way around that, And when we're talking about the respect of human beings' lives, we have to hold that to a high standard. We can't find these little holes in someone's argument or some outlier and try to say, well, it didn't happen like right is right, wrong is wrong. Pick a side. The cost of living is going to be eternity wherever you end up.
I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get the word out. I don't know how to keep the change. In 15 years right now, we have this meeting again. It's everybody going to be saying the exact same things that they did. And then your kids are thrown right in with it like everybody else. So we got to come up with something. We got to come up, white people, Black people, we got to come up with how you can actually change.
My thing is be willing to just have the uncomfortable conversation. That goes for both communities right now, man. No one really wants to have the conversation. So as long as we're willing to put ourselves in vulnerable spaces to understand one another, we will continue going the right direction. But we have to be willing to be in an uncomfortable situation and talk about the things that will affect us, like Coach Pink will say, 15 years from now. I don't want to be here 15 years from now. I want to be in a place where I can see my kids interact with whoever they want to interact with, whoever they want to marry. That's where I want to be in 15 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the only way to grow. You have to have those conversations. You have to have people that are willing to have those conversations. But I think it's the only way for us to grow and to honestly try to move forward as one race, as one, as humanity. as to what, this country is supposed to stand for.
I played with Emmanuel Acho, right? And he started this series on Instagram called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And the one thing he always says is, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? And I think that's what everybody needs to be honest with themselves about. Black or white, male, female, it doesn't matter. Are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? And I hope everybody wants to be part of that solution.
I concur with what everybody said. I think to add another layer to that is we got to examine our each individual hearts, in each of these groups to look deeply and retrospectively look at ourselves in the mirror and say, who are we as a person? What are my things that I'm fearful of that cause me to look at somebody in a way that would treat them badly? And that goes for, all hues of melanin in our skin. We have to look at our hearts. We could magically get rid of racism, and if we don't check our hearts, we'll find another idol to put up and treat each other wrong in a different way.
As we say goodbye, I want to thank our panel once again for their courage to speak openly about race in America and for listening to each other. It is not always an easy discussion to have. I ask each of them to continue the push by talking with and educating others moving forward, because it's going to take a collective effort to bring about racial harmony.
We'll have to come together as one, all races. We have to hold our friends, family members, and colleagues accountable, because as we've heard over and over, racism didn't just start. It's just now being recorded. So how can we all come together as one to finally end it?
What will our grandchildren and great-grandchildren say when they study what happened after 2020? Will they be proud about the way their country changed the course of race relations? Or will they wonder why the same problems still exist? It's up to all of us to move the conversation forward towards solutions. You get to choose what side of history you'll be on. Thank you for joining us.
To love, have compassion, and just be genuine good people.
A big part of the solution is love.
White people, black people, we got to come up with how you can actually change.
I don't want to be looking back. It's like, hey, we still here.
Are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution?